You're really clueless, aren't you? The inheritance, the inheritance. Hurry up and hand it over. My sister-in-law barged in as soon as the front door was opened, happily chatting away at her own pace. Despite not being close, why is she bringing this up now? I was puzzled by these words thrown at me. If it weren't for David's inheritance, I wouldn't even bother coming to such a gloomy place. Indeed, dressed from head to toe in glittering clothes and accessories, she must have found the contrasting home of her brother David and me, where I live, to be dreary. Yet, it was my sister-in-law, who wouldn't even pay respects at the family photo and brought up the estate at the doorstep, whom I found far more insidious. This attitude of hers was nothing new. She prided herself on her looks and was harsh on her gentle-natured husband. I had heard from him that she changed her tune entirely once he began to climb the career ladder and earn a substantial income. Her indifference during his frequent hospitalizations and her lack of tears at the funeral had me thoroughly disgusted. I had decided to cut ties with her, but my greedy sister-in-law would not allow it. Come on, we don't have all day. You're busy too, right, Sarah? My sister-in-law, with sparkling eyes unbecoming of her age, clearly believed she was entitled to the estate. But I held something that would quickly distort that expression. It was the last words from my late husband. Read this, and you'll understand everything. I am Sarah. Having become a widow in my mid-60s, I led a modest life without trying to overreach. About a month ago, I lost my beloved husband. A long-standing illness, which worsened, was the cause. We met and married in our 40s, so we had no children. Having supported each other for 20 years, the loss was immense. Without children, I wondered if there was a need to keep making meals for someone else. I even thought about following my husband, but sadly, I lacked the courage. However, he had often told me, no matter what happens to me, don't give up and live on. You're an independent and wonderful woman. Now, these words of my husband had become a will I couldn't ignore. After his death, my life changed drastically. I witnessed his last moments at the hospital, then immediately proceeded with the funeral arrangements. During this time, I was saved from drowning in grief. Encouragement from many, including my sister and her husband, and their help with the funeral preparations allowed me to get through this turbulent month. Honestly, I barely remember this period, but my sister later told me, "You did a splendid job as the chief mourner. David must be at peace in heaven." Although it was all new and overwhelming, and I did fall ill for a few days due to the stress, not everything was negative. The funeral was attended by far more people than I had anticipated. David had worked for a nationally renowned company and was a senior executive, so I expected many strangers. However, colleagues spoke highly of his character, and some were moved to tears. Some even came from overseas branches, sharing stories of their outings with David. I regret not being able to spend ample time with each guest, but made sure to note down names and addresses to properly thank them later. With my sister and her husband's help in these arrangements, I am now able to breathe a sigh of relief. This calmness, bestowed by my husband's gentle nature, fills me with endless gratitude. Although I'm proud to have been blessed by such a wonderful person, recently I've doubted if everyone in my life has been as splendid. The cause of my concern was the presence of my sister-in-law, David's sister. Being about a decade younger than us, she is still considered youthful. Compared to women her age, she maintains her appearance and is somewhat of a local celebrity. She is aware of this and enjoys her days. Which is fine. Although she's 58 and perhaps shouldn't be flaunting her legs in miniskirts, that's not for others to judge, and I don't mind. The problem is her constant snide remarks towards me. I'm not as beautiful as she is, nor am I as devoted to yoga or spa treatments. Sarah, you always look so plain, don't you? Like a total country bumpkin. Aren't you embarrassed? David's rich, why didn't he marry someone prettier? She'd start with a snide remark every time we met, sizing up what I was wearing as if appraising it. Wearing no-name brands at your age, really? And those shoes, how long have you had them? You were wearing them last time we met, right? Sloppy people might dress well, but it shows in their accessories. I can tell right away. Won't David buy you anything? He's not into material things, so if you asked, he'd probably buy it for you, right? I have enough bags and shoes, but not as many as my sister-in-law. It ends there if you call me sloppy, but I've always been someone who doesn't buy much. Rather, if I buy something new, I make sure to get rid of something old, so my house is rather Spartan. On anniversaries or birthdays, when asked by David what I wanted, I'd plan a trip without hesitation. Things can be bought anytime, but memories are priceless, I believed. Now that David is gone, I'm glad I kept making that choice. Every time Mila made a snide remark, I hinted at this, but she'd just snort. David wasn't much of a looker, so in that sense, you're a good match, aren't you? But you must have married him for his money, right? No matter the insult, it always ended with this. That's what bothers me about her behavior. She's convinced I married David for his money and has been spreading that among the relatives. In reality, there were plenty of women who tried to get close to David with that in mind. David wasn't into gambling or nightlife, his hobby was fishing, so I was surprised by the amount in his savings when we married. But I had no intention of splurging with it. At that time, I too had a 20-year career at my company and had my savings, though not as much as David. We shared the value of not spending much, which was one reason we got married, not as my sister-in-law claimed, aiming for David's money. I've explained this to her multiple times and asked her to correct the misunderstanding among our relatives, but she never listened. She's unilaterally decided we're incompatible and picks on me. She has always been competitive, and David tried to avoid her as much as possible. Perhaps because of that, she hardly helped with David's funeral preparations. I was the chief mourner, but when David started getting sick and hospitalized, despite numerous contacts, my sister-in-law never offered a word of sympathy. Instead, she once got angry, saying, "Don't bother me with every little thing." So I decided it's best not to tell her anything about David. Still, I didn't want to worry David, so I lied kindly in front of him, saying she was concerned about him. In the end, she never showed up in front of David until his passing. At the wake, she acted as if it was a chore to be there, detached like it was someone else's problem. Yet, the relatives around her were saying, she's been crying every day to the point of losing her appetite and tears when she heard about her brother's condition, and that's why she's still down. Maybe she didn't visit the hospital because she couldn't bear to see David weak. Hearing that, I felt an indescribable frustration, compounded by the shock of losing David, and tears welled up. My sister-in-law, portrayed as a tragic heroine, had plump skin, hardly someone who lost her appetite, and of course, no traces of tears or swollen eyes. Despite telling me not to contact her, she acted meekly in front of the relatives. My sister, sensing how I felt, skillfully led me away from there. Without her, I might have lost my composure and shouted at the relatives. Knowing my sister-in-law was self-centered to the point of disrespecting even the deceased, I decided to keep our interactions to a minimum going forward. I gradually sorted through David's belongings, balancing work and house chores, and along with that, I worked on regaining my composure. At first, each item of David's I disposed of felt like erasing a memory, but I told myself that the memories with David are what my heart remembers the most. Cherishing the times with those who came to offer prayers at my husband's photo, I aimed to return to my peaceful life. Then, as if to shatter that peace, came my sister-in-law, predictably. She rang the doorbell and rattled the sliding door. "Sarah, you're there, right? Your sister-in-law has come all this way, open up." Though I've never thought of this person as a sister, she would raise her voice as if to appeal to the neighbors. I was in the middle of hanging laundry, so playing dead was not an option. "What were you doing? It took so long I almost got sunburned." As soon as I unlocked the door, before I could say anything, she barged in, thrusting a bag from a famous foreign brand into my hands and started taking off her shoes. What's the rush?" After I finally managed to squeeze out some words, she exaggeratedly sighed. "See, I've been so busy and couldn't come to see you, right? I thought you might be feeling down all alone, so I brought something nice for you." Saying this, she snatched back the paper bag she had handed over and started taking out its contents right there. The bag contained accessories and perfumes Mila usually wears, and some fancy baked goods, none of which seemed fitting for me at the moment. Did she really think I would be overjoyed to receive these? Moreover, her behavior today was unervingly kind. I know I've been harsh to you before, but you were the wife chosen by my only brother. I didn't want his wealth to go to some gold digger. But seeing you at the funeral, I realized you were different. Only someone who truly loved David could cry so much and disregard what others think enough to give a speech with disheveled hair. Even when trying to appease me, she couldn't help but comment on my appearance and actions, a habit she's probably not used to breaking. Yet, the look she gave me seemed almost admiring, as if she was meeting someone she respected. Confused by her suddenly changed demeanor, I still received her compliments without fully understanding her intentions. Feeling suffocated by the presence of someone whose true thoughts I couldn't decipher, I gently said, "I'm sorry. I'm still settling his affairs. The house isn't in a state to invite you in right now. Maybe you could just pay your respects to David for now?" Her usual cold gaze snapped back as she looked at me with widened eyes and shouted, "You're really clueless, aren't you? You don't think I came here just to see your gloomy faces, do you? What about the estate? That's what this is about. You wouldn't normally need to say that, right? Excuse me?" I was baffled by her gesture, asking with her palm up as if expecting something to be handed over. "How long do you think I've been waiting? I know roughly how much David made, so I have a good idea of what I should be getting from the inheritance. It's useless for Sarah to try and hoard it all. Hand it over quickly. If you're thinking of tricking me, I'll call a lawyer and the police, you know? The distribution of assets is being handled by a lawyer, so there's no tricking anyone. Don't play dumb. Half of the inheritance is mine. It's supposed to be split between you and me, right?" The sister-in-law was fuming, her face turning red as she yelled. I just tilted my head, puzzled. The lawyer had explained that for the deceased siblings, the basic share of the inheritance is 1/4, divided further if there are more siblings. Since David and she were 2 siblings, she would normally receive 1/4 of the money. David had often lamented over this, especially since she had mocked his looks since childhood and, along with their parents who favored the beautiful sister, bullied him. To prove them wrong, David worked hard, earned scholarships, attended a national university, and climbed the corporate ladder to success. Knowing that David had a challenging life partly because of his sister made the idea of her receiving any inheritance troubling. I encouraged David to decide for himself when he consulted me about it. Only after his passing did I learn of his decision. Unaware of this, my sister-in-law's attitude shifted drastically as she began her tirade. "A wife like you taking almost all the estate, you're just as greedy. I always thought it was suspicious for you to marry such a plain man after turning 40. There's only one reason to spend a lifetime with someone whose only attribute is his wealth. Listening to you talk about love and shared values was just delusional. Hand over half of your share right now, and I'll leave you be." The sweet words and gifts were apparently just a ploy to extract David's estate from me. Having always been targeted by her, I had suspected there might be an ulterior motive. Shouting at the entrance of a house that still houses David's photo showed her lack of morals. Wondering what David might think of this in heaven, I told her to wait and decided to show her a certain document. At the mention of it, her eyes lit up, and she started spouting nonsensical things about using the money for a fancy French dinner. I didn't let myself get drawn into her pace and instead handed her the document I had brought from the back room. "Please, this is from David. It's for you." What I handed her was David's last letter, his will. As she realized what it was, she quickly unfolded the paper and skimmed through it. Her symmetrically groomed eyebrows moved up and down, clearly agitated by the contents of the letter. "What does this mean? I didn't know about this." Her ignorance was her own fault for never trying to see David. Words were on the tip of my tongue, but they likely wouldn't reach her as she slumped down, weakened. The will stated, David had left his entire estate to me as a final act of gratitude to his wife, who had supported him both physically and mentally, sharing a peaceful and fulfilling life together. The letter he left was so passionate it was almost embarrassing to read aloud. Upon reading it, I was moved to tears again by the thought that David had been thinking of me even during his illness, with the primary goal of not leaving a single penny to the sister-in-law. In other words, there was absolutely no money going to her. Despite the clear answer, the sister-in-law, unable to accept reality, murmured, "What does this mean?" as she stared into the void, her face turning pale. There was no responding to her anymore, and I somewhat forcibly ushered her out of the front door and quickly locked it. Through the door's glass, I could faintly see Mila's figure swaying right and left, dragging her body away. My relief at having read the will and believing she wouldn't bother me anymore was short-lived, as I received a call from her the next day at noon. "I never thought Sarah could be so wicked. How could you deceive me like this?" Her fury was palpable even over the phone, giving me goosebumps for a moment. But I hadn't done anything wrong, nor did I deserve to be slandered by her. I was about to say something to regain my composure when she cut me off. "You think you've knocked me down and are feeling good about yourself? Too bad, you're going to experience pain now. This is your punishment for angering me. Don't think begging will make me forgive you." While I had a vague idea she was talking about the estate, I couldn't understand what she meant by me experiencing pain or needing to beg. Confused and silent, my silence might have been mistaken for fear, as she began to laugh loudly, her voice crackling. "See, it's too late for apologies. I would love to come over now, but I'm busy securing an appointment with a lawyer," she declared triumphantly, but why she needed to consult a lawyer, and why she was informing me, was beyond me. Instead of bothering with me, she should be at her usual yoga or beauty treatments, I thought absently as she yelled, "Don't you get the situation? Talking to you is so irritating, it's bad for my beauty. I'm not satisfied with the asset division, so I'm preparing to sue. You might have conspired behind closed doors as a couple, but the idea of a wife taking the entire inheritance is absurd and against the law. If you thought showing me David's will would shut me up, you're sorely mistaken. Using your sick husband to your advantage shows you have no conscience. I have every right to a share of the estate, and I intend to claim it." It seemed she believed I was trying to monopolize the estate by manipulating David into writing the will. Unable to stay silent any longer, I replied, "It'll be a waste of your time. The will was directly given to the lawyer by David himself. I only read it afterward, so there's no trickery involved. Besides, I've been informed by the lawyer that you have no claim to the inheritance. So, I think it's best if you don't go, as you won't be taken seriously." My calm response seemed to infuriate her even more as she raised her voice. "What's with that attitude? Enjoy your confidence while it lasts. I'm serious. I've called several times since yesterday and finally secured a meeting. The lawyer was moved by my determination. Since the lawyer is on my side, I can even sue you for damages," she said, leaving a line fit for a villain in a comic before hanging up. I couldn't understand why she bothered calling me. Perhaps thinking I'd be unnerved by the mention of a lawyer. Far from reflecting on not receiving a penny from her own brother, her determination to take what wasn't hers felt almost refreshing. Months passed without incident, and I managed to sort through David's study, which was filled with belongings. Simultaneously, I packed up little by little and moved out of the house filled with memories of David. David had always wanted to live in a quiet detached house in the suburbs after retirement, so I decided to fulfill that wish. The house and land were sold, and the proceeds were used as a down payment for a new place near where my sister and her husband lived. It was regrettable that David couldn't experience this with me, but Mila, our dog of over 10 years, seemed happy in the new home. Seeing her frolic on the smooth flooring made me worry about her legs, so I bought a pale-colored carpet to ease the strain. With the house sold, I had significantly fewer possessions, but the thought of gradually creating a comfortable living space filled me with anticipation for the future. Yet, the strange sensation of David's absence persisted, exacerbated by the emptiness of the minimally furnished home. Especially when Mila slept, I often found myself lost in thought, knowing it wasn't good for me. One day, as if interrupting my melancholy, my smartphone rang insistently. Half asleep and not bothering to check the caller, I answered. "You're determined to drag me down, you plague." It was the sister-in-law. Her sudden outburst instantly woke me, though I still had no clue what she was raging about. Without waiting for my reply, she continued. "It's your fault I'm getting divorced. All because the inheritance didn't come through." What? My bewildered response seemed to confirm her suspicion. Likely, she had told her husband about expecting a share of David's estate, and its disappearance had soured their relationship. But still, for a marriage to break down just because an estate didn't come through speaks volumes about how fragile that relationship was. It's troubling to have their problems dumped on me. "Why don't you apologize instead of staying silent? Because of you, I can't live anymore. What am I supposed to do all by myself?" "You could get a job. You're still young in your 50s. When I replied calmly, she went silent. Whether it was the suggestion to work or the mention of being in her 50s that irked her, it's high time she faced reality. If you were living off your husband's salary, you shouldn't need the estate, right? Why did it lead to divorce? He was after David's fortune from the start. If your brother's estate isn't coming, then I have no use for you. A woman who only has her looks and money to offer, and I wasted decades of my life on you. I want my time back." That's how angry he was. Why should I be the one getting yelled at? Such a pathetic man with his meager salary. I'm the one who wants my time back. I had only met her husband during their wedding introduction and at yearly New Year's gatherings. Like the sister-in-law, he had the impression of being flashy with branded clothes, accessories, and a fondness for sports cars. Since she mentioned he had a low salary, they must have been leeching off David together. They probably had no savings and squandered their living expenses. Given their luxurious lifestyles funded by someone else's money, she had no right to complain. She got what she deserved for marrying out of greed and wastefulness. I even went to a lawyer, but I was turned away at the door. They told me there's no inheritance coming to me. Everyone's against me. But the one I can't forgive the most is you. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened." Despite my advice, she apparently went to see a lawyer. Which turned out to be a futile effort and ended up embarrassing herself. "Sarah, you brainwashed my husband, didn't you? He said he should have married someone like you. Why does your name come up in my husband's words? You must have seduced him behind my back, right? There's no other explanation." "How did you come to that conclusion? I don't even have your husband's contact." "Lies. My husband has never praised a dowdy woman like you before. You must have seduced him and had an affair. Confess, and I might forgive you if you hand over the estate." Huh? This is pointless. Overwhelmed by her baseless accusations, I gave up on the conversation and hung up. The house has already started to be demolished, and the land has been sold, so even if she showed up, there would be nothing left. Naturally, I haven't given her my new address, so the chances of us meeting again are nearly zero. Just to be safe, I set her number to block immediately, deciding once and for all to live peacefully. About half a year later, I've gotten used to my new life with Mila. My sister and I go out to eat once or twice a month, enjoying fulfilling days. Sometimes, at my sister's suggestion, we eat in the room where David's photo is, so I'm sure he's happy too. Thanks to regular health checkups, my recent medical exam showed no issues, and the area has plenty of convenient stores, leaving me with little to worry about. If anything, the call from the city office a few months back was concerning. The sister-in-law, now divorced and penniless, had applied for social welfare, but was denied because relatives willing to support her were required, and all the relatives who once praised her unanimously refused to help. Knowing her lavish past, she ended up being isolated by her relatives. They contacted me through the city office, but I certainly had no obligation to help. Considering we weren't close during his lifetime, as she only married my ex-husband for his money and couldn't even behave properly at his funeral, I see no reason why I should do anything for her now. After all her talk of me being after the money, she ended up drowning in her greed. I hope she learns to live with some introspection. What happened to her afterward is unknown. Rumors suggest she quickly left a job she found due to conflicts and that neighbors noticed her ex-husband's absence, leading to speculation about a gray divorce and her moving out. Whether it's true or not, no one knows where she is now, and I've lost interest, gradually forgetting about her. Having regained my peace, I cherish my time with Mila even more. She's become even quieter with age, resembling David in her gentle nature. My sister, always a dog lover, surprised me one day by adopting a puppy. Excitedly visiting my sister and her husband's house, I was greeted by a small Shiba dog. Immediately, Mila's eyes lit up as she approached the Shiba dog, happily watching the puppy bounce around. I smiled, hoping this puppy would become a good friend for Mila, as I watched the scene.